All right, Advanced Electronic Music. So this short video is going to cover what I talked about today in class. For those of you who are not in class today because you do Thursday, this is what I will be covering on Thursday. Like I told the class today, I think this is one of the more difficult concepts to kind of get your head around in terms of pro audio, but it's incredibly important. So I want to make sure I cover it, and you having this video should be helpful in terms of you being able to follow what how these things work and how you use them. So this week we're talking about using buses, send channels, and aux channels in Logic Pro, or any DAW for that matter, in pro audio period. It's a very important concept dealing with routing signal and also using what are called aux channels to send effects to other places and to use aux channels in other ways. Okay? So let's talk about how this works. So to start with the basic principle, as we know, if you have a channel strip in Logic or in any DAW, the most common setting is that it sends to the stereo output, right? So if I have sound in a channel, if I have a recording, if I have a MIDI instrument, it's going to send to the channel strip output, send to the stereo out, as you'd expect. So, and the way this looks, of course, in Logic is this. If I go in here to the mixer, or just zoom in right here on the channel strip, every channel strip has what's called, what looks like the output here, which is stereo out. If it's no output, then it'll be no output, but it's usually listed as stereo output because that's the default. So if that's our normal setting, it means that when we have something in the channel, it outputs through the stereo, okay? And in conjunction with that, if I add effects onto a recording or a track, a channel, what happens is these effects they take the signal and process it and then send it through the stereo output, okay? So before we go on though, let's talk about these three concepts. So these three concepts are all interrelated, and honestly, I don't feel like they're not good terms, but they're kind of the standard default terms that we've been using for decades. So, but it's hard to remember them because I think they're not great terms. The first one is the auxiliary channel, or aux channel. And an aux channel is an empty channel used generally for effects, or used as basically an intercepting channel between the main output and a channel that has sound in it or has sound involved in it. A send is the amount of gain sent to an aux channel, okay? So when I send sound, I'm sending it from a send, and it literally is a volume knob that I turn up or down that sends some of my signal from a channel to my auxiliary channel, okay? And then the last thing, the bus, is specifically the channel that the gain is sent on, okay? And you can think about the bus being a variable number or letter. In this case, it's a number. So I choose a bus number as my output for the send, and then on my auxiliary channel, my input is that bus, okay? So, and the way this works in Logic is that when I use a send, it automatically creates a bus channel, or an aux channel, sorry, okay? And as soon as I basically designate a send and give it a channel number, it instantly creates an aux channel that is receiving that channel number from the bus, all right? So let's see how this works. So the reason I would do this, the most common reason, is for this. So as we know, if I have a reverb outputting to the channel output to stereo, it's going to affect the sound, right? And in the old days, I mean, even 10 years ago, and you can still find these, your effects, were not really adaptable on a channel strip, meaning that I couldn't send some of my channel without reverb and some with. Now we can do that. But the way this would work is that generally I would use an aux channel, I would move my reverb over to an aux channel, okay, like so. And I would the input of the aux channel would be bus 1, okay? Then on my original channel strip, I would use now what's called a send, which we can see on every channel strip. and I would designate send to bus 1, and then I would give it some gain with the little knob button here, and it's going to send some of my signal from this channel over to this channel, where it then gets processed with reverb, okay? And the nice thing about that, of course, is now, you know, reverb is one of the most common problems with this. The sound, reverb tends to make a sound very muffled and muddy, right? And I want to avoid that by sending some of the original signal without the reverb and then some with the reverb, okay? So let's talk about how this happens in Logic and give you a demo of this. Let me delete this first track. So I just have this little track here with a nice little drum loop that I didn't make, I just borrowed it. Okay, it's a little loop. And in the traditionally, if I were to install a reverb on here, okay, traditionally we didn't have these knobs here, which actually change everything and make it so that we don't actually need to do this for reverb, especially in Logic. I don't know about a lot of other reverbs, but most reverbs these days have a dry and a wet, or what's called a mixer, okay? So as you might remember, the dry outputs the original signal with no reverb, depending on how high this is. So if it's at 100%, I'm going to hear 100% of the signal without reverb on it, okay? And then I'm going to add 50% of the signal with reverb on it only. But traditionally, this is the way a reverb functioned, right? We would add reverb onto a channel and we would get a sound like this. That literally sounds like the entire channel with reverb on it. Okay? Well, obviously this is not ideal, right? Because what's happening now is that we have a sound that's completely washed out with reverb. There's none of the original coming through, and it's really loud, right? It's just loud and very cavernous. In fact, it's also clipping. So I want to avoid this, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here, and again, you know, what I'm doing now applies to a lot of other effects. It doesn't matter anymore for reverb, but it really matters for some other effects that you send some of your signal to the effects channel, the effects aux channel, instead of using it on the output. So as I said, I'm going to go to this send area right here. I'm going to go over to bus, and I'm going to choose a bus number. Now this is entirely arbitrary. I could choose bus 200 or bus 10 or bus 5. As long as it's empty, it's just designating a bus, okay? And let's go to our mixer and see what happens. So Command 2 goes to the mixer, and I can see as soon as I designated this bus, bus 5, instantly Logic made an aux channel. You can see it right here. And the aux channel's input is bus 5 right here. Okay? So now some of the signal is going out the main outputs, right? The stereo out. But also I'm going to send some of this signal to bus 5. So what I'm going to do now is move the reverb over to bus 5 or to the aux 1. I can even rename aux 1 like drum verb, okay? And then, and actually what that does too is now you'll notice if I go to bus 5, it says drum verb, right? Which is really nice. So now, if I turn this knob, I'm sending some of the signal to the bus, to the drum reverb, okay? So listen to the change that makes. I'm going to output this normally, and then you're going to see the gain on the reverb turn up, okay? Okay? So what you're seeing now is I'm getting this signal coming out the main outputs clean, and then it's also being sent via my bus over to this reverb channel through the bus input, and it's being reverbed, okay? So anyway, so in this case, obviously, there isn't really a problem because I can just use the dry and wet on the reverb, okay? But there are some effects that don't have that control. So let's talk about those. So it might be, I might actually go under Chromaverb and pick one. One of them is, for instance, the auto filter, okay? If I look at auto filter, it does not have any sort of Oh, it does have a dry signal. So once again, I can add dry signal in here. So this is more and more common with effects. And so once again, I actually don't need to do this because I could turn the dry signal up and it would output some of that sound, okay? So I'm sure there are some of them, and I do think this is a good practice for busing. And there's all sorts of other really cool tricks you can do with busing. So it's really important that you know how to do this. Let's talk about one other thing too. Imagine I have a bunch of tracks, okay? And I want to use effects over and over. So imagine I set up a reverb for a bunch of different things. Well, now I can send multiple channels to that bus and use a single reverb instead of using multiple reverbs in this case, right? So normally, if I wanted to get reverb from 5 channels, I would have to put 5 reverbs in them, right? But now I can use a bus and send my sound all to this single reverb to make it, to change that sound, all right? So this becomes a really important aspect of trying to, first of all, consolidate your tracks and also to minimize CPU usage. You can also unify your sound better by using a single reverb, right? Everything gets sent to it in some way. So that can be really useful to basically create, some sort of mix. So, all right, so let me talk about the second most common usage of a reverb like this. Or sorry, not of a reverb. The second most common use of a bus. So this bus here, in this case, right? So this is actually what I just explained. Now I could have multiple channels using the same bus and then therefore using the same reverb and mixing it and adding it together, okay? If I go on here to having multiple channels. So this is kind of a diagram of our standard output. We have multiple channels. I might have 100 channels, right? Depending on the music. I might have 15. The stereo output is what everything is outputting to, okay? But imagine I want to do something like I want to control all of a certain amount of channels with one channel strip. So, and the very common usage of this is to bus all the drums first into a bus and then output them, okay? So what I would do is I'm going to change all of my outputs to bus 1. In this case, I just arbitrarily chose bus 1. And then my aux channel is going to receive bus 1 and it's going to accept everything first. So in this way, I'm consolidating all of these tracks into a bus first, or an aux channel, and then outputting them, okay? So this is really useful for things like, imagine you have 10 drums, 10 drum tracks, and you want to mix them together. And you've got them mixed really well. You like how they sound together. But then the problem is like, the drums are a little too loud. I need to turn them down. Well, now you have a bus that you literally can just turn the one channel down, right? I have this aux channel, and I can lower the volume on that single aux channel to prevent it from, to change all of the drums at once, okay? Which can be very powerful tools. So I can have multiple aux channels for different groups of instruments or sounds. So that is a basic principle. So let's see how that works in Logic. So what I would do is, instead of sending, using the send here, okay? So imagine, for instance, these are all drums. So I have here kick drum, snare, okay, hi-hat, and maybe a tom 1 and a tom 2, okay? So what I would do is, I'm not using these sends here, okay? So we're just gonna take these out. No. Oops, ooh, don't want that. Take all these buses. I may not be able to do them as a group. Let's just go no send, because we're not sending now. I mean, that might also be something that's going on to a different channel. But instead, what I'm doing is these stereo outputs right here, which also live in the main window right here, right? The stereo output. instead, the stereo output now is going to be changed. So I might grab all of my drums here, go down to bus, choose bus 10, for instance, and notice once again, Logic has made an aux channel whose input is bus 10, B10 here, okay? So what I would do now then is I could go in here to this channel and add my effect, for instance. Or not even add my effect. Literally, it could just, or channel EQ. Imagine these are drums, and I have them all separate, and now I want to mix them together as a drum kit, right? Hi-fi drums. So I chose a drum preset for my EQ, and now all of these drums here are outputting to this channel, this bus, where it's getting EQ treatment as a whole group, and then outputting, okay? So that is basically the concept, right? And this is a hard concept to think to get your head around, though, because it's, you know, you have these virtual tracks, right? I have these aux tracks that don't live, first of all, in the main window, but they are kind of in the background. Now, one last thing I will show you is that, as you know, most of the time the default for the right channel is your stereo output. But if you start using buses and sends, it will switch to whatever bus or send you click on. So imagine I have 3 sends in here, which is very possible. They all have different levels. Every time I click on these, this channel switches to those buses, okay? This is going to switch to bus 10 if I click on it. If this was the stereo output, it would switch to the stereo output because I clicked on it, okay? Stereo output down here. But it'll switch to the bus if I click on the bus. You can see now bus 15. So keep that in mind. This channel over here is variable. It will change depending on what we're doing. And it's a very useful, I love this in Logic, having this other channel strip right there that's variable and changes based on what you click on it. Because all I have to do is click on bus 15 here, and instantly it's over here. And I can go to my audio effects, I can add my channel EQ, I can add my auto filter, whatever I planned, and then go to the next bus, right? And here, maybe this one has a reverb and, you know, a chorusing effect. Sure, okay? So now I'm sending to this chorus effect via the bus. So it can be really interesting, really useful, and you know, buses are really essential. Understanding this kind of infrastructure in any DAW is really important and useful, okay? So anyways, I will leave it there. And if you have any questions, we're covering this on Thursday in class. And also, you know, you can watch this video again, of course. Hopefully it will be helpful and useful. But yeah, okay.